Okay, so no millennial pause, right?
No
We're
millennial
just
pause.
we're just getting going.
No,
Okay,
just kitten pause.
just getting going. We thought we would try a new format for the podcast, and we're going to put it up on the YouTube channel. So whichever format you're listening to this in, you're very, very welcome. This is Lora O'Brien and
Jon O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School. Oh
we'll
man, we're of an age that some part of my brain was like two Ronnies with this, and it's goodbye from me and it's goodbye from him.
let's not do that.
No, let's
But
not do that.
speaking of him, what we wanted to talk about today was on my original Lora O'Brien YouTube channel, which is now the OM Academy. We had a mad notion that we were going to do an AMA at one point, Ask Me Anything, and we got loads of great questions. And we did actually record them. This is probably about 3 years ago now. We did record them. It was definitely pre-COVID. And we lost the file somehow. We were like up a mountain on one of our site visits or site quests, and we lost the file somehow.
We were recording on one phone with the list of questions on another phone, and then the phone battery died, and
it was
it was entertaining. But I think some of it like made it onto the internet, some fraction of the file.
I'm not sure
maybe.
it did. I don't think it did. But anyway, what we thought we'd do is go back and do this, and then in the comments below or in our emails, if there's other stuff that you want us to talk about, then we can absolutely put it on the list and try and answer questions. We won't get through all of these today. No. There's like 28 comments on this. So Virgo Philp asked, for Lora, how did you come to realize you were non-binary, and how well has that been received by people in your community, local and online? Big apologies if that's too personal. I'm mad fascinated by gender. Now, I have spoken about this on my Lora O'Brien YouTube channel, I think in passing or in a particular video. But somebody else, Kylyak Skahawk, actually weighed in and said, I'd be interested to hear from Jon about his reaction to Lora coming out as non-binary. My discussions with my husband around gender are really awkward, and I'm also fascinated by gender. And then Alexa said, I second this. So we got a big thumbs up on the gender side of things. And I guess for being non-binary, it was a very slow burn for me. It was a very slow realization. I was quite invested in motherhood, but there have always been elements to my physical form and my hormones and all the rest of it. I mean, I'm 6'2". You might not tell from online, but 6'2", pretty well built, not much happening up top, It is what it is. It's all good. Used to cause me a lot of trouble as a teenager, like mental trouble, I'm not a real woman, or I'm not what. And then I realized why I felt like I wasn't a real woman. And looking back, it all kind of makes sense, like, having super long hair down to my butt when I was like 7 or 8 and insisting that it all just chopped off, and everybody thought I was mad, and I was like, no, it's just too much hassle, and all of that was going on. So there's been a lot of clues my whole life, but I only really started around the 2000s, probably early 2000s. I would have started to understand myself as non-binary, or more correctly, gender fluid. Now, I go under the non-binary tag because I'm not one thing or the other. Most of the time I'm cruising along in neutral. I think I could go one way or the other, but mostly I'm pretty neutral. It's hoodies and tracksuits and the short hair. Actually, I could talk about the short hair. I had a whole moment of gender euphoria after I got my hair cut again, more recently. But sometimes I like to specifically go one way or the other, and it actually feels like cross-dressing. I've described it that way. I know this is mostly me talking, but how did you feel? Because when we met, I was a little bit kind of like...
You've answered the first part of the question, though, but you need to answer the rest.
What's the rest?
Well, the rest was like, how, having come to that realization yourself, and you said it was in the 2000s, so it is like late enough in life, but you'd always kind of struggled with certain elements of gender identity as you grew. And so the other aspect of that question was like, how was it received? by, your community, local, online? Like, have you like how has that realization impacted your perception of self within community, the community's perception of you? Like, I know you focus very much on internal locus evaluation, where, like, you focus on what you mean to you, regardless of other people's external opinions.
Mhm.
But was there any kind of concerns or any kind of like challenges that came along with that?
I believe that most of that would have been put to bed around my late teens, and coming into paganism, to segue to the topic of this channel, I developed a very strong sense of self. Like, I often joke, witchcraft saved my life. And it really did. I was a very troubled teenager. And I was very lucky to find a craft family that were very supportive and were very understanding. And bear in mind as well that this was late 90s, and it was traditional, like what's called British traditional Wicca, but it was Irish traditional Wicca, obviously, or the Irish branch of it. Things were still very dual natured. There was a god and goddess. There was very gendered roles within the traditional Wicca, and my high priestess would have very much been, come up through the ranks in those very gendered roles. And the whole concept of, the dual nature of deity was very much present within that tradition. And yet, me being bisexual, because I realized I was bisexual long before I realized I was non-binary, and I would say more probably pansexual, though it's not. I'm pretty like asexual, I suppose would be the best term. Aromantic. But, and if those terms are confusing you, don't worry, that's not what we're talking about today.
Google them.
Sexuality and gender are related, but one does not equate to the other. So just for the record, your gender and your sexuality are quite different things, and people have very different experiences of both of those things. So we are talking about gender, but it did kind of open me up to having those conversations with people who would have grown up, in an era when those gender roles were very, very specifically entrenched.
Oh yeah.
And I was the coven maiden, so I was being trained as like the up and coming kind of high priestess. It was very much the thing that I was going to branch off and form my own high priestess coven and all the rest of it. So I was lucky with regard to that early community, very, very lucky. Shout out to Barbara Lee, love you, Witch Mammy, and all the other amazing people that have been in my craft life and my pagan life. And then when it came to just being online and our own community, like certainly the Irish Pagan School is deliberately and specifically set up for people to explore and express whatever gender they have going on in their heads that day, or however they identify themselves, or whatever is going on. We are absolutely adamant that this would be safe space for those people. We have come through our own family journeys with various degrees of gender identity. Not my stories to tell,
but it's not right, it's not wrong. It is about considering these things and exploring these things, because we have so much that is handed to us by our upbringing, by our culture, by our ethnicity, by the country we grow in, like by lineage. There's so much that's presented to us when we are a small infantile human, that there's so much that's just put in as fact. And if we don't actually take a step back sometimes and question those things, or make it safe to consider or safe to question those things, you might come out with the same answer at the end of it. But if you don't have the freedom to explore the narrative in a safe and respected way, then how do you really know? So, and I think that's a big important part of why all of our community spaces, like, we won't have transphobia. We just won't. And someone might be, okay, well, I'm they, them pronouns, he, him pronouns, these are pronouns, whatever it is. If that is who and how you are, that is how I will see and honor and respect you, because it's how you choose to present yourself. And if, you know, you do more growing, you do more exploring, you do more figuring out, and that changes down the line, and you choose to present yourself with different pronouns, then I'll do my best to see you and accept you as you choose to present yourself. And that's kind of how we approach these things, because at the end of the day, like, it's not about right and wrong. It's not about plus and minus. It's not about, you know, male and female. Like, we're all humans at the end of the day, and whatever way we choose to conform or non-conform or express ourselves, we need to make that safe. We need to make that, you know, something that is accepted and respected, as long as it's not doing harm to other people. You know, if I choose to be he, him pronouns, masc presenting, that is just who I am. That is who I've always been. I have kind of considered these things. I've gone through those questions. I've kind of had those moments of like, do I like guys when I was a kid? And the answer was like, no, I'm sorry. There's some very telling kind of physical attractions that I have, but more so mental attractions that I have. And you know, but I had the freedom and the safety to explore and ask that question.
Well, again, that's sexuality.
Oh,
not,
it is.
not
It is
gender.
But like the idea, like as a kid, we put on family plays, and it was always hilarious to dress the only male presenting boy child in the family at the time in my siblings' communion dresses, because I was the good fairy godmother or whatever like that. And so, you know, it was just play. It was never like, you know, I'm undermining my masculinity by wearing a dress.
No, but there was always, like, when we were growing up, there was always an element of the joke to that.
Yes.
And that's something
it was
that,
a thing.
Yeah. And like, you know, and it, like, I would have cousins or whatever who dressed up for parties or anything like that, or for fancy dress. And it's always, it's not hilarious, you know. And I really hope that as a society, we're going to be, or we have started and we continue to move away from that, because that has very real consequences for the idea of trans women and their safety.
Yeah.
For people still seeing trans women as men in dresses.
Yeah.
For the trans panic defense in America, certainly. I don't know if it's legally viable here, but the idea that you're allowed or you're excused from hurting or killing somebody because they surprised you by not being what you thought they were. And apologies for like this is very upsetting stuff.
Yeah.
And it does have very real consequences. And I'm not trying to shit on your your childhood explorations, because sometimes for young boys that's the way that they start to understand things, you know.
Oh, I understand it, but like I'm 4 decades into this thing called life, and the world has changed, language has changed, our understanding has changed. And even if you take the advent of computers, like, that has only been in the last 20 years. And now anyone could, like, wherever you're listening to this, you're probably listening to it on a computer device, on a phone, or on a, like, you know, something like that at all. And the thing you're listening to this podcast or watching this video on has more computing power than the first computers that put us on the moon. Like, we have come so far with the development of technology and the interaction and the access to information. And this is where I'm not going to steer off topic. It's that access to information that has allowed us to explore these questions, that have allowed us to begin to have these dialogues, begin to have these narratives, because people are no longer closeted within a small local community, growing up with limited access to data and limited access to answers to their questions. And so, like, I get presented with all these TikToks of like, yeah, in my generation, like, you know, we got a job, and, you know, we got up and we got, like, you know, we earned a living, and, like, we went to war. Your generation is sitting here trying to figure out what a man is. And I was like, yeah, okay. That, again, it's a stupid, toxic masculine narrative. But yeah, we are free now to question what is masculinity, what is femininity, what is, like, this idea of gender, the scope of gender, because we're not fucking bashing our heads in with rocks anymore. Because we have grown as a society, we have grown as okay, for the most part, we have grown the fuck up as a species. But again, where we are now, there are still stupid hate-filled
Stop
crimes
using
and
the H
harm
word.
happening.
It's an ableist term.
There is still idiotic harm and damage
I
being
think
done.
that's
There is
ridiculous.
still
Ridiculous.
nonsensical
Nonsensical.
harm and damage being done over like lines on a map and hate. Oh, you hit me, so I'm going to hit you back. We have other talks on our channels about this. But when it comes down to the gender and the idea of gender, we've come so far with access to information that we're now able to have these conversations, explore these narratives. And that is something that we think is of value. Whether someone comes back with the same answer that, they were presented with as a child, or someone comes back with a different answer that they were presented as a child, doesn't matter as long as it's the lived truth for them. As long as it's something that they honor and something that makes them feel more seen, more comfortable, more accepted in this crazy world that is life. And if that changes when they grow again, great. We need to allow for there to be growth and allow for there to be change.
Yeah. And I suppose to loop it back to the question that was actually asked, we do tend to go off on tangents in case people weren't aware. To loop that back to the question, my family and my community have been mostly supportive. I have sat down with, I suppose, the most important members in my family, as in the people that would really hurt me if they weren't accepting of me, and of my children and my grandchildren and all the rest of it. So I've sat down with them around the kitchen table and had the difficult conversations. And some of that was so that other people in our family wouldn't have to answer those questions or be uncomfortable in that way or educate or correct, because that's something I took on a long time ago, and it's part of my job. So I will be the lighthouse. I will draw that I will draw all that and make sure that I'm the one that's having to have those difficult conversations wherever possible. And the upshot of all of that has been a lot of acceptance and a lot of support and a lot of shoulder shrugs of it's just Lora and it's fine. It's just who those people are. It's whether it's me or anybody else who is on their gender journey. It is a case of, we have to be our authentic selves. I have to be my authentic self, whether that's our religion, our spirituality, our polarizing content, our very strong opinions on cultural appropriation and colonization and respect for tradition and all the rest of it. Regardless of all that, gender, we also have to be our authentic selves as well. So, Jon, you got a specific part of that question. And I suppose if you could maybe, when we met, we're together 9 years now.
Going on a decade soon.
9.5 years now. And when we met, I wouldn't say I was feminine, but I was much more femme kind of presenting, kind of vampy femme presenting. It was kind of biker chick kind of situation going on. I did have short hair. I actually had the shaved hair. I just looked like a big lesbian, actually. That's really what I looked like. There was a lot of that going on. But you would have met me in a much more kind of feminine state, I suppose. And I wasn't really talking a lot about being non-binary. And my pronouns are still she or they. It's fine. And I think I'm still quite kind of tied into feminism and a woman's lived experience and socialization and the difficulties of all that. So that has been a lot of my work in the world up until this point, and probably will continue, because the war on women is real, folks, in case you weren't aware. And in all the years I've been doing that, the changes have been minuscule, relatively minuscule, and it's just, there's a lot of work to do. So I still kind of have a foot in the camp of feminist womanhood. So she pronouns are still fine for me. But I feel like a they, just myself. And really, I feel more neutral than anything, rather than she or he or they. So rather than plural, I feel more like a zero kind of, not in a minimal kind of way, not in minimizing myself or anything, but just if there's some kind of a scale, I'm pretty much true neutral. And then mostly if I swing one way, I would kind of vamp up, I suppose, to be kind of high femme, but again, in a less florals and more leather, I suppose, but still quite feminine, right? So, Jon, to get to the question that you were asked, how has your perception or understanding, and like, do you remember our first conversation on this? Because you signed up for a heterosexual relationship effectively, and I'm having a boy day, he's gay, so that's a whole thing. So what has been your experience or your journey with that?
Yeah. I think when we met, I met you in that like high energy state where you were, all business, presenting at like Fealty. And, I also met your then girlfriend at the time and your then husband at the time, because you're polyamorous. And so I had all of these pieces of information presented to me by my sibling before you even arrived in. And then you arrived into the space, and I saw the 6'4", because you're wearing heeled boots that day.
6'5" actually, in those boots.
In those boots specifically. Tight boots, tight jeans, leather jacket, and like you just strode in to dominate the space. And my first thought seeing you was like, wow. And then I got to know you over time. We became friends, and then we began to explore the concept of a relationship together. And that's when we had many different conversations. We had many different kind of chats and talks about stuff, because the only way you're going to build a successful relationship is by having the uncomfortable conversations from time to time, by saying, okay, well, here is my real self. Here is my principles. Here's what I won't compromise on. Actually, one of the most entertaining conversations that we ever had when we started out was, if any of these things happen, it's over.
Yeah.
And it was you talking as much as me talking, and we both laid it all out. As I recall, we were in the bed of the couple at the time, and I was like, if you do any of these things, if any of these things happen between us, it's over. And that, more than anything, allowed for a lot of security in our relationship, because we were very open at the very beginning.
We had our parameters laid out very, very clearly.
Well, we've both been hurt before. We've both been harmed in the past.
But I think, in fairness, I think that didn't just come from a place of hurt for both of us. I don't want to speak for you, but
it came from a place of better expectations for ourselves,
of making sure that we weren't going to make the same mistakes again.
Yeah. So like, we both had failed relationships. We both had unsatisfying relationships. So like, we decided
abusive. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah. Okay. And so we both came into this going, here's the things I won't compromise on. And so that allowed for a very firm foundation of discussion. And then the first time we had our disagreement, because we generally don't argue, the next kind of piece of the puzzle fell in place, which is the idea of definition. Like, okay, we were beginning to go back and forward, going around in circles, having this discussion. It was getting a bit heated because we couldn't understand each other's perspective. And then I think I was like, okay, well, what's your definition of this word? And you're like, well, I define this as this. And I was like, my definition is not that, it is this. And then we realized that there was areas that we needed to explore, like our understanding of things. Now, the reason why I'm kind of clarifying this aspect is because when we got to those conversations of gender in our relationship, we already had such a great framework. We already had such a great foundation.
Yeah.
We already had very clear expectations. We already had very clear narratives. And, we built it right from the get-go, which meant that we were okay having uncomfortable conversations. We were okay and comfortable. In fact, Jon can get very upset at times if he doesn't know where the narrative is going. And so we would start, an uncomfortable conversation by saying, I'm okay, we're okay. And so that's our commitment to say, listen, I need to have this conversation. It's not like we need to have a talk,
like we're breaking. It's not the we're breaking up conversation.
No. It's literally, I'm okay, we're okay, but I think there's something we need to clarify.
Yeah.
Or I feel I need to talk about this. Can we have a moment, or can we sit to it?
Or we need to figure something out before we get to a point where we're not okay.
Absolutely.
Because that's what happens with a lot of people. It's like, oh, it's fine, until it's not fine.
Yeah. And if the relationship, or if the foundation of the conversation, of the connection, or any connection, is not based on conversation and being comfortable talking about anything, then there is an underlying issue in the relationship. So being able to kind of approach the conversation of gender, then it was okay, because we had built that framework, we built that balance. And I was absolutely desperately in love with you by this point, because I'd gotten to know every inch of you. And so when we had this dialogue, and you're like, okay, but Jon, on days when I feel more like a man, does that make you gay? And I'm like, that doesn't matter. Because it didn't matter to me. Because the person I'm in love with is Lora. With your mentality, your sense of humor, your intellect, your passion, your creativity, and your physicality. Like, if you were to say she, they, he, they, them, whatever it is, and it doesn't matter whatever it is, because I'm in love with Lora. And this is where it gets to the other side of it, and this loops back to where we started with this idea of an external locus of evaluation. Our relationship is about us. Our connection is about us.
Yeah.
And so whatever works for us is what works. And if other people's opinions, like what my dad always says, opinions like assholes, everyone has one. And some are more full of shit than others. But like, other people's opinions and perspectives, okay, it's not like they have no value, but they only have as much value as we choose to put upon them. And so if someone's like, oh, well, we're walking through the shop, and it's like, lads, like, how's it going, lads? And because Lora has hoodie day.
I would regularly get misgendered, apparently.
We have accidentally walked out of the house, gotten into the car wearing matchers, both wearing jeans, both wearing hoodie, both wearing yeah. So, but if people look at me and the person I love, and it's like, oh, well, there go a pair of gay guys, so fucking what, Or if people like seeing my wife, my darling beloved, when they're in a femme presenting circumstance, oh, there goes a het couple, there goes a straight het couple. They are also wrong, because we're not a het couple, because my Lora is gender fluid. We're not a straight couple, because my Lora is bisexual and asexual and poly. So, all of these things are other people's perspectives, because they are on the outside looking in and they don't fucking know. And so when it comes to how it worked for me, or how it felt when we had this dialogue or this connection about gender, we sat, we talked about it, we kind of explored it from every angle we could think about exploring it from, but we did it from a place of, I'm still on board with this, I'm still on board with our relationship, this doesn't break any of our I'm out rules. It just meant that was another way to understand each other. And actually it deepened our connection, because you were very anxious about having this dialogue. You were very concerned about how it might impact me. What was I going to do? Because I've been raised very, very masculine in North Dublin, with all of the toxic elements of it. And I've worked really hard to undo those. But you were very concerned. How is he going to take it? How's he going to react? Is he going to laugh?
Concerned for you.
Yeah, I know.
And your self-perception, and which would be, I think, maybe it's better now, but certainly at the time it would have been a little bit more external locus evaluation.
I've done a lot of growing.
You've done a lot of work on that.
I think even then, when we had that conversation, I surprised you, because I had been doing the work and it wasn't as much of a worry as you thought it would be.
No, it never is. Once you actually have the conversation, it's never as bad as you think it's going to be.
So when it comes to Lora's gender, that's Lora's business. And, I see, honor and respect whatever way Lora chooses to present at any particular given day. And I will also add to that, I also revel in my delight that whatever way Lora chooses to present on any given day, Lora also chooses me.
Yeah.
And so I think that answers the question there.
I think probably and more, more than you bargained for.
No one signed up for that. But what you are signing up for with these comments, with our mailing list, is authentic connection to Ireland. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And part of being authentic is being real, is being like, straight up, like, you're not going to, we get it from time to time. People are like, why are you so direct or so forthright? And like, we don't pull punches. Now we're not coming out swinging for everybody, but when it comes to it, we'll
I
be
swing
very
sometimes if it's necessary.
We'll be very direct, and we will be very open to the best of our ability. And the person who asked the first question, was I concerned about it being an overly private question? And yeah, we accept that they're private, and we might not answer every question because it might be a private question. But on the flip side, we are public presenting individuals.
Yeah.
And by, as Lora said, us being the lightning tower, being the lighthouse, standing up and saying, okay, well, here's how we have those narratives. Here's how we have those conversations. It makes it easier and safer for other people to do the same. And that's a big plus for our communities.
But I would say, if you're new to all this, if you're trying to wrap your brain around it, if this is the first time you've thought or heard about any of this stuff, generally these aren't questions that you really want to be asking people. Like, you never ask somebody what's in your pants,
No.
It's rude if you do it for a baby. It's rude if you do it for an adult. It's absolutely nobody's business. What's in your pants, let's call it, right? And the idea that we would be open, I don't want to kind of set people up for the notion that it's okay just to be, you have a curiosity, so you get to ask, right? We specifically opened ourselves up to this. We got that question in. We could have ignored it. We could have deleted it. We chose to answer it, right?
Yeah.
Specifically because it was an AMA, ask me anything. But generally, like, people's gender, if you're in a public bathroom, if you're out and about in the world, none of your fucking business. Like, less of your business than anything else that you're encountering that day. Okay. If people choose what bathroom they want to be in, if people identify themselves with certain pronouns and it doesn't seem to match up, nobody owes you gender expression. And that goes for me. I don't owe anybody femininity. And like I said, that's something I came to very early in my life. I get what's called, what would be referred to as misgendered. I get confronted in bathrooms because people don't believe that I have a right to be there, Now, as it happens, what's in my pants is the same bathroom I choose to use, but that's actually fucking irrelevant. It doesn't matter. I will take that. I will take that for the team. I will absolutely take on those people because it is relatively safe for me to do so. It is not always, or quite rarely actually, safe for a trans person to do the same thing. So if you're out and about in the world, A, mind your fucking business. B, if you see somebody getting harassed or getting questioned or anything like that, take action, step in, because it's so difficult. And I know we have so many things distracting us at the moment and so many things to worry about and so much of a shit show that's going on in the world, right? But people matter at the end of the day. And whether they're your friends, your family, or a stranger in a public bathroom, people matter. So take care of each other. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. Really appreciate it. And I think, hopefully we'll be doing many more of these. So if you have a burning question, if you have a query, if something, geez, like, I wish I could ask X about this, or I wish I could ask Lora about that, or John about this, fire it into the comments. Let us know with an email. If you're not on the mailing list, make sure you join the mailing list, because we hopefully will be giving a lot more of this kind of content on a regular basis.
And we do, for people who are on the mailing list, one of the reasons to stay on it is we do a session like this, just a chat and social session. And I think we wanted to bring that a little bit more. That's very contained for our community. And we wanted to bring a little bit more of that out into the public domain and realms. But being able to just meet up online, hang out. We call it the second Saturday. It happens the second Saturday of every month. I think we forgot once, but generally, if you're on the email list, you will get an invitation to a Zoom room that goes out by about 3 p.m. Irish time on the second Saturday. But you could take out your phone right now and set your calendar. And as long as you're on the email list, you will get that invitation. So, and it's called the second Saturday invitation.
And we have people, it's for our students, people who are in the school, people on the mailing list, and people join it from all over the world, all over the world, who kind of are interested in the teaching that we provide at the Irish Pagan School, who have connected with us via the YouTube podcast, on the blog, wherever they happen to find us. And, it's just delighted to be around other people who are on a similar path to ourselves.
Yeah. And if you are not on the mailing list and you want to join, we actually have a very easy link. It's irishpagan.school/free. And there is literally a year's worth of free content if you want to learn more about paganism, more about what we do and how we do it. There are so many resources. There are so many different offers. There's ancestry, there's trustworthy resources, there's fire festival cheat sheets, there's all sorts of different ways, and they will all end up with you on the mailing list. So do be aware of that. You can unsubscribe anytime, obviously, but do go irishpagan.school/free, and you'll get access to, like I said, over a year's worth of free content. So you will get the invite if you stay on the mailing list. So thank you very much for your time, for your attention.
Go to Mahagath all.
Slán.
Take care.